All right, Genesis 22, let's call this one Mary and the Good Samaritan. Why? Because those are two New Testament stories that either directly or indirectly relate back to this chapter. Let's see possibly how. Well, first, the indirect relation is between the Good Samaritan and this particular chapter, in which we're going to see that you need to look out for the needs of the people around you. Like the Good Samaritan was willing to look out for the needs of the man who had been beaten and left half dead, as Luke 10 will tell us. And so in looking out for the needs of that individual, he ignored the danger in refusing to ignore the needs of the individual. And that relates back to this chapter in this way. It's specifically telling you not to ignore the needs of your brother in a number of areas. First and foremost, if he has a lost animal, you don't necessarily have to know if it's your brother's or whose it is. If you can take it back to him, if you can identify it, cool. Take the responsibility not to ignore the need. But if you don't know, just take it in case they come and look for it at a later date. Moving on from that, it's going to say it's not just an animal, anything that's lost. Look out for them in many ways, like the golden rule will say later. In the same way, you probably want someone else to look out for your own lost items. And so moving on from that, it's going to be not just looking out for your brother and sister, but look out for the environment, the society that you're living in. Because even if you come to a bird's nest and you're free to take the eggs, don't take the eggs and the mother. Look out for other people in the sense that leave a remainder that can possibly grow back, and look out for people who have needs in addition or much like you do. So look out for needs beyond your own. Don't just mindlessly consume everything without leaving a remainder for those who might come after you. And then finally, when you build a house, there's a thing called a parapet that you're supposed to build around the roof of your home or around your home to make sure that anyone who falls off the roof doesn't necessarily die and make you potentially responsible for blood guilt. And once again, in all three situations, it is a call to look out for the needs of others beyond your own. You might be wise enough to understand how your house is built. So the parapet isn't so much for you, it's for those who might not know your house as well. And so in addition to all that, there are going to be a couple of other rules that don't seem to sum up well in a nice, tidy outline. But essentially, it's going to talk about, in this chapter, some things that don't blend well together. And one that's more controversial than others is you're not supposed to cross-dress, meaning men are not supposed to cross-dress in women's clothing and vice versa. But beyond that, other things that don't blend well are certain seeds in the same field, likewise, certain fibers in the same garment, and ultimately certain animals plowing together. In addition to that, it's going to talk about putting tassels on garments. And it's going to seem really random here because it doesn't have the context that it has back in Numbers, where it says the tassels are once again a reminder, much like we see in Deuteronomy 6 and Deuteronomy 11, of God's law and the counsel that it gives you for leading a productive life in the days ahead. And so much like they were taught to teach their children as they were coming and going, to put signs on their bodies and parts of the law on their doorposts and on their gates, they were to put tassels on their garments as a reminder of the importance of God's law. But ultimately, the final thing that relates back to Mary is the fact that this chapter deals with the laws prohibiting adultery. And the reason why I thought that was so interesting is that in looking at Jesus' own life, there was a controversy about whether or not his mother had been unfaithful to Joseph. And this is a chapter that says, in Israel, betrothal really seemed to be an unconsummated marriage, because a man who slept with a betrothed woman could be killed for doing that. And so in this situation, likewise, the story of Joseph indicates that the penalty likewise for a woman who ran around on a man to whom she was betrothed, it could have been death. And so I thought it was so interesting that in looking back at the story of Jesus' birth, Joseph was willing to forgive Mary whether or not she was guilty. And so understand this. If you got people in your life who are willing to forgive you and love you, whether or not you're guilty, because of course it turned out Mary is innocent, but if you got people who love you, whether or not you're blessed, not so much people who enable you, because he held her accountable. He wasn't going to marry her, but he wasn't going to put her away in a way that was going to put her life in danger. And as we go into the weekend, there's a principle of the word that says mercy triumphs over judgment. And so even though he might have had Mary dead to rights under the law, he chose to show her love and mercy. And once again, to the degree you got people like that in your life, God willing, you first of all thank God for them. And then two, maybe you show them that you appreciate the fact that you're loved in that way. God's best to you as you go forward in him, though.